And we are recording.
What's going on, man?
What is up, brother Andrew? So, today we have a guest, and his name is Andrew Rivers, right? Ladies and gentlemen!
Yeah. Andrew's fine, or just Drew is fine.
Yes, brother.
Mhm.
So, could you please tell us about yourself?
Sure. I have been practicing something I call inner alchemy. So I'm just here to kind of share my experiences with that, and it ties heavily into like energy work and manifestation, and just kind of navigating this place, space, multiverse, however you want to look at it, to acquire the things that you actually desire.
When did you begin your journey, you would say?
I've always been interested in like spirituality and energy of stuff. I didn't quite know what was what, but I just knew that I had an interest in it. So, over the years, I've had a few traumatic experiences, and I went on a healing journey to just figure out like how can I um, integrate these experiences in a way that's serving me and doesn't feel like it's something that's hindering me or something
Yeah,
that's holding me back. So that's when the kind of, inner alchemy practices started to, uh, you know, really start to kind of reveal themselves to me. And I was just like, okay, well, if I'm on this journey of healing the things that have happened to me and getting to a place where I feel okay just in my day to day life. Um, if something more happens, great, but I just want to feel good. I want to feel centered. I want to feel like peace, right? Um, and the practices over the years have taught me to kind of channel this energy of peace and satisfaction. And I noticed that a byproduct of getting myself in a peaceful state, in a state where I feel content and I feel safe and I don't feel like I have to do what everybody else is doing, and I feel like I have some type of control over my life. The byproduct of me finding peace was that I noticed things to change in my external environment. Whether if you look at it as a matrix or life or the world or whatever, I noticed things changing in that part of my life. So it made me more interested in learning, um, about the things that I practice.
it's usually when we go through the unprepared phase or the less desirable phase of life where the shit hits the fan and you're like, fuck, where do I go next? Where do I find the answers? And that's when typically, from what I've noticed, spirituality enters in our lives.
Yeah. I mean, it comes in many different forms. You may be drawn to a particular religion or a practice like breath work or meditation or whatever it is. As long as you feel like it's helping, then I think that that's the most important thing. Is how can you use this thing that's finding you and you finding it to uh, put yourself in a more peaceful state?
For sure. So the other day, I saw one of your videos,
Okay.
and in one of your videos, you talked about um, people think that energy work is foreign, but actually, unknowingly, people do it every day. Is one of
Mhm.
the videos you made. So, what's your take on that? And do you feel that energy work is like a label for things? Or is it like is something humans have done, whether in terms of let's say, oh, I want to clean my house. I clean my house. That's technically energy work.
Mhm.
Or I need to wash my car. So stuff like that, the basic stuff. So maybe I kind of answered your question right there, but would you like to elaborate more on that?
Yeah, sure. I don't have any at this point in my journey. I don't really have um a way where I feel like energy work and physical stuff are different. Like I know that everything that I'm doing has some type of energetic effect or energetic equivalent. So um the point of that video is that I show that in even very basic things you are doing a form of energy work. When you're in a cluttered room, right? It's cluttered, there's old food in there, you haven't organized anything. It's just a bunch of chaos really. You Most of us don't feel comfortable in that kind of environment. Some of us might because they may be used to that, but a lot of us would feel a lot more comfortable in an environment that is, excuse me, organized, clean, clear, probably has some fresh air, coming through, and even something as simple as um, just cleaning your room or cleaning your car so that when you're in that space, right, which is a very intimate space for most of us, our bedroom, the car, places that you spend a decent amount of time in, those spaces that seem like they're just kind of like it's just, a space. It creates clarity of mind when you keep it clean, when you keep it organized versus when it's cluttered. Um, and you'll notice that when you do clean something that's long overdue to be cleaned or cleared or organized, you feel very good after cleaning and clearing it. I can only speak for myself and some of the accounts that I hear from other people, but I think generally when we clean a space, we feel good about the space, right? There's a bit of mental baggage that comes into play when you're in a space that is just like not how you want it to be, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So we're all doing energy work all of the time in various different categories, but I felt like that was a very simple one that people could relate to, where you are, something as simple as just cleaning. You know what I mean? And you can go very deep into this as in terms of using specific herbs to assist with the cleaning, or if you're, there was a Japanese author that wrote a book that about charging water, about
Okay.
like restructuring water, and he took actual scientific evidence to show like, hey, when you speak to the water in a positive way, it has this kind of structure under the microscope, and when you are speaking to it in a negative way, it has this structure, or when you play this kind of music it looks like this, when you play that kind of music it looks like that. That there's something going on with water. So I know that's a little bit off track, but even just charging the water that you're using to clean could be having an effect on your space.
Hmm.
So um this does go into like deeper like esoteric area, but that's the kind of stuff that I'm about, is understanding more of the unseen, or the things that usually people aren't really paying attention to it,
Yeah.
and then applying it in a practical way, in my day to
Yeah.
day.
Yeah. Well, that's why we're doing this too, brother. For beautiful people like yourself who are able to articulate those things that you talked about, there are aspects of the esoteric side of things that are also energy work that may not be, you can't see it like point A to point B. It's not linear, it's non-linear.
Hmm.
And it's there, it exists.
Yeah.
So going back to, if you're okay with talking a little bit more about the charged water side of things, have you personally done anything like that? Because I've heard about, I believe his name was Dr. Emoto.
Yes.
Um,
Hmm.
I
I
believe
have the
that's
book
the name.
somewhere. I don't think it's behind me, but it's somewhere around there. Hmm.
Have you have you heard of any other similar practices that you'd like to share from the esoteric side of things when it comes to energy work, or any metaphysical related stuff that could be helpful for the normal people that may not be into the deep learning stuff but might be curious in trying to understand what it could be?
Yeah. So, looking back at his experiments and stuff, it makes sense when you look at it from the lens of water, like symbolically represents a medium between the physical and the energetic realm. It's something that is very impressionable. It can hold memory, it can hold, like I don't know if you've ever heard the saying, don't swim where somebody just drowned or something like that. It's like an old like, folk thing where you're like, oh, don't do that. You know what I mean? Like superstition almost. Like don't, but the reason why that is it's based on water holding memories. If somebody drowns somewhere and is holding all of that trauma, you know what I mean? That's something that you should take into consideration. Um, I've done practices myself in terms of, using water with, energy work that I'm doing, and I designate the water to represent a particular thing because it's a very easily charged substance. So if I'm doing some type of altar work or ritualistic practices, then water will represent something. It may represent the room. It may represent myself. It may represent, something that I'm thinking about, right? If I don't have anything else, I know I can always go back to water and charge the water with intent to represent a particular thing. It's very impressionable. And that's how I use it in my practices, is that I generally use it just as kind of like local energy. It allows me to, if I usually designate it as, okay, this water will represent the room. And then there's things that you can do from there to kind of change. And it's not necessarily literally the room, because you can think of a room as something like local. So it's your local energy. So like we're looking at the symbolic meaning behind water being a medium. I'm designating this medium to represent the room or nearby energy, local energy. And between those two things, now you can better manipulate the energy of a room with just the water. You know what I mean? Now there's a lot of different things that you can do with the water, but point is that water is very impressionable, and you can designate it to mean something that has some significance for you.
Now, one might think that, or at least I'm thinking right now, the question comes, would it just be limited to water, or would it be applicable for anything and everything in one's life? So maybe this chair that I'm sitting on, or the food that I eat, is it related to things you consume, or is it related to things that you wear or utilize? Or is it just specifically to water?
Well, when I say water, I'm I'm basing it off of my understanding and what it means for me, right? Somebody else may vibe with, being able to charge something else, right? It could be an object. People do that too, where an object now becomes the, microcosm kind of relationship to a thing that they're trying to work with or whatever, right? This is when you kind of get into like crystals. Like crystals, they'll say this crystal does this and this one does that, and you can charge it, leave it in the sun, leave it in the moon. You know what I mean? Like you can start doing other work with the materials. Now, for me, I vibe very much with water, and you can even see it in my last name. Like my last name has, water context to it. I don't know if that assists with making it easier to work with or not, but I know that it's it holds enough weight, right? And this dives into a whole nother esoteric concept. It holds enough weight for me as someone who is, an inner alchemist, somebody who is, constantly manipulating energy around me, that I can use it in the ways that I intend to use it. Now, it doesn't mean that you're limited to it, because if you look at like candle magic, people who burn those kind of long, like 7 day, 9 day candles, and there's a lot of traditions that use candles to um, work with energy, right? So a candle can represent a situation. It can represent you. It can represent, just clear communication. It can represent a lot of different things. Some people, they like to buy, excuse me, green candles to assist with their abundance, because like I'm gonna, and you'll even find it in like these spiritual stores. It'll say like, lottery candle, or a candle for, removing blockages that have to do with abundance. It should typically be green. And like these are well practiced things. So it's not limited to water. It's just water is one of those things that works particularly well for me and for a few other people that I know.
Yeah, I heard someone say, not someone, I think Sadhguru said it, that how we are majority water based, like in our
Hmm.
body and all that, and how sensitive we are with the moon cycles and how that affects our behavior. So I'm trying to see in that way how, out of all the things we just talked about, the candles or the clothing or whatever, the food, how water can be one of the most sensitive ones, or sensitive in the sense the potent ones that could affect us. I've also seen, and if you'd like to elaborate more on this side, not so many religious traditions. So, like in Islam, you have the water. I believe it's called Zamzam. I don't
Hmm.
know if you've heard about. Have you heard about it?
I have not, but I'm listening.
Okay,
Hmm.
it's they get the water from a well,
Hmm.
um, somewhere in Saudi Arabia. I think somewhere in Mecca or Medina. But it's the holy water, and then you have water from India. You have Ganga, uh, the holy river. So
Hmm.
water from there, or I believe the holy water that they have in the churches too, that you're
Hmm.
supposed to, I guess, put on yourself in terms of purification.
Right.
Um, yeah. Any thoughts on these things that I just mentioned?
Well, you'll see symbolism, right? Because if you're not practicing those things, they kind of just, I mean, even when you are practicing them, they're symbolic. Like you, for holy water, this is water that is blessed, it's pure, it's removing, negative energy. However you want to look at it, on how someone who's practicing with holy water is used, there's a history and background on why this thing works. It has a history of working. So that it's sort of, and this is going kind of back into like inner alchemy, concepts and stuff. It sort of makes it easier for you to work with it when you can tie it to something, right? Like there's a track record of this working, right? As far as you know, like you may or may not have experience with it, or but that's kind of irrelevant. Your mind sometimes needs an anchor, right? And I'm speaking as speaking from the perspective of operating outside of a particular group, right? So like as an individual, you can look at the water and then look at a group and be like, wow, this group is using this water to do something. This group over here is using water to do something too. And it almost kind of it anchors it a bit more. Like if everybody's doing this, it must work, right? It makes it more um accessible to work with it and use it because of all of the collective symbolic meaning behind the thing. Um, so even if you're not a particular group or religion or spiritual practice, you may find that you work with water easily because there is kind of like this unconscious agreement that goes on where you're like, oh, well, this thing works. Like people are already doing it. Even if I don't agree with everything that is being practiced with a particular group, or I do, it's being used. There's history behind it, right? It's just like sage. Like sage is one of those things where it's like most people who are in some type of spiritual group or understanding, they know, oh, like people use sage to clear energy and clear negativity and, like smudging, and it just clears stuff. That's what it does, right? There's kind of like this collective agreement, like this does this.
Hmm.
And whether or not you actually have a whole bunch of experience in it kind of becomes irrelevant, because it's like, well, collectively, as a group, it people are getting results from it. Like I hear from personal people, I'm seeing it online, I'm seeing other, like, native cultures that are using this for, you know something. They're using it for something, so it kind of becomes this like anchor, or a permission slip, like, oh, this does work. You know what I mean? So you sometimes people feel like, energy work is like this thing that you have to practice, like you got to get good at it. In a way, you're already doing it, right? If you kind of lean into the things that are already kind of established, right? Regardless if you have experience with it or not, you're leaning into stuff that's already established, and you can begin to do energy work on a level that you may not necessarily be practicing now, and it you'll see some type of result. But that's because collectively, right, when you look into your external environment at other cultures and people and stuff like that, it kind of cements, like, oh, this does do a thing, right? I'm at the belief that it is not the items themselves or the things in your external environment that are causing the change. They're just like mediums between you and a goal. So if the goal is to clear your energy, then you may think to pick up sage to clear your energy. Now you have to ask yourself, is it the sage that's cleaning? It's not really the sage that's cleaning, it's you that's cleaning. You're just using a physical thing to assist with the cleaning. But your mind trying to comprehend this, it just comprehends it like, oh, this does this. Not necessarily like, well, if I'm the one that's actually cleaning, can I just clean on my own? And like you start going down the rabbit hole of all these other potential things that you can do. And yes, you could clean your energy with nothing at all. If you have a practice or a way of doing that, you definitely can. There are rituals to do it. There are practices that you can do that's just movements and sounds and get the same result. But starting off, I think it's good to go with things that are kind of established, because it makes it easier. And the more that you practice it, the more it becomes like, oh, this is actually doing something. You start picking up on it more.
Okay. Yeah.
I know that was a lot, but yeah.
No, 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 that helps. That helps. I'm just trying to see what angle I can go from here. Because there are moments where I myself intuitively I see how it can be helpful to elevate oneself, and at the same time, I tend to be a little skeptical because I'm new into this. At least maybe my experience right now as I'm navigating through this lifetime. It feels new. However, when I do meditate, when I do observe, when
Mm,
I try to listen and understand these traditions and the intention behind it, not to just dismiss it and be like, oh, there is no proof, I dismiss it. Instead of doing that, actually sensing the subtleness and the beauty behind the rituals and the intention behind it, it almost always convinces me that there is something, but it's not going to reveal itself just like that until and unless you're ready. And that's why I guess a lot of atheists or skeptics or who are scientific thinkers, rational thinkers, it's beautiful. It's healthy to be skeptical. Otherwise, you don't want to falsely believe into these things and make it another dogma. It ruins the purpose and the search for meaning and the intention behind it, right?
mm.
Um, all of this to say, were you ever in that headspace previously? Were you ever skeptical? Were you ever questioning the validity of these things when it came to energy work? Or spiritual practices?
Yeah, I would definitely say yeah. Like the more that I practiced it, the more I started to notice it. I can break this down from a, energetic science perspective, but um the way I look at it is, there is the bulk of my life, and then there was one experience in particular that made me question like reality itself. It's a very traumatic experience for me, but the trauma, right? And a lot of people would say that it was like a spiritual awakening. Like you'll hear people say, "Oh, I had a spiritual awakening," and a lot of times the accounts for a spiritual awakening is something very traumatic happening, and then when you start to restructure how you're approaching life because you're just like, why is this thing happening to me? And then you start to look and be like, okay, well, what's really going on here? Like, you start asking like real questions, not just kind of like going about your life. Like, you're just like, why did this thing happen? You know what I mean? You start asking the universe this, and then you start getting answers. Like shortly after this experience I had, I, for the first time, experienced like number synchronicity. Which for anybody that's experiencing that, you know I think that they would agree that it's rather alarming to see the same number over and over and over again. You kind of think that you're going insane a little bit, you know what I mean, where you see it on the clock, and then you see it on a receipt, and then you see it, on somebody's license plate, and then you see it, you know what I mean, like, and this is like, 9-10 times in a day you're seeing the same exact number, popping up, and that can be very alarming to um a mind that is not used to those kinds of experiences. So that was the first thing where it was like, okay, well, I don't know what's going on, but I know something's going on, right? I had to kind of get past the point of like me uh, feeling like I was going insane a bit, and just be like, all right, well, let me just like research this. Let me see if other people are experiencing what I'm experiencing. And that kind of put me on, a whole exploration of this path. But it was initiated by a event that happened that sparked me to start questioning like reality itself. Because otherwise I was just living my life. I wasn't really thinking about much other than going to work and going to do the things that were my obligations and responsibilities. And that moment really like shook me up. It kind of shook me awake a little bit. I was just like, okay, let me see what's going on here. um it took many years for me to like really start to piece things together in a way that I'm like, oh, okay, I understand why this thing happened, I understand why that thing happened. Like, I can pretty much explain everything that's happened in my life up until this point on like why it happened. Even the things that don't feel good have some type of a purpose to it. It's all, you could say it's pre-designed or it's synchronistic or however you want to look at it, but it all has a purpose. And that was one of the things that I didn't feel in control of before. I didn't feel like things had a purpose. I just felt like life was random, and some people make it and some people don't. And, very, I guess, limited way of thinking of like what's actually going on. I had no awareness. So I would equate it to my awareness kind of expanding after that moment.
Now, there was a sentence you mentioned
Mhm.
while you were talking about the sage, and you said, is it the sage purifying or clearing, or is it you doing it onto yourself but utilizing sage as a medium to do it, right? So when it comes to energy work, if we can go a little deeper into that statement you made, how much of it is placebo or how much of it is actually like real? What is your take on that?
Mm, that's a tough question to answer because it's not like I don't look at it like it's a placebo, right? Like it. What I can say is that there are feelings at the beginning of damn, is this really doing anything? Am I doing the right thing? Is this actually going to change anything? I don't feel like it's changing anything. I feel like I'm just doing stuff and it doesn't really have a purpose. You have the doubts, right? But there was also a side of me during that phase that was just like, just keep going. Now at the perspective this perspective that I'm at right now, I understand what was happening. What was happening is that basically I was going from being subject to my environment, right? This thing that looks like it's outside of me, to realizing like, oh, this stuff around me is a reflection of me, right? And that was very difficult for me to comprehend because I have all these experiences and I'm like, well, why would I choose any of this, negative stuff that's happened to me if I'm actually in control this whole time, right? I remember the first time I heard that, like a teacher say that, and I was just like, how is that even possible? Like, I didn't choose for this to happen to me or that to happen to me or whatever, right? I was still kind of in that mode of like, nah, life is happening to me. I'm not the one that's in control, right? And it's slowly been like this slow progressive thing where I'm starting to realize, oh, okay, like I start seeing things and I'm making connections between me and my internal dialogue and my thoughts and my emotions and all of that stuff, and then seeing that reflect itself in some way on the outside, right? So like, I had talked to you about this before, but like when I make my videos, I go to the park to make the video. I know it's gonna be a good one, or I know I'm gonna have some ideas or creativity when I'm already getting stuff like that's coming through in my mind before I even get to the park. But if I'm not, I don't force it anymore because I'm just like, I understand that there are moments where you're supposed to be moving and there are moments where you're supposed to slow down or pause, right? I don't ever put myself in a situation where I'm trying to force energy. And anytime I do force something, it tends to not work out the way that I want it to work out. So I've just learned through like this practice of like, okay, I'm feeling the inspiration to do something, I do it. You know what I mean? It feels easy, it feels flowy, it feels whatever. I don't put myself in a situation where I feel like I'm obligated to do a thing. Oh, it's Tuesday again, I gotta do another video. It's Thursday, I gotta do another video. I don't do that because that's forcing the energy, right? So I don't I like to keep myself in a state where I am honoring when I'm getting the indication to slow down or rest. Because a lot of us feel like we have to work, work, work. Like this, hard work mentality is something that's very prevalent in, culture right now. It's like you got to work hard to do, this, that, and the third, or achieve your goals or whatever. But people get burnt out working hard, right? And I'm not saying that there aren't people working hard that's successful, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you need to work hard to be successful. Things can be flowy. You can still get things done and then honor when you need to rest and honor when things are slow and just be like, you know what? Things are slow. Why am I feeling anxiety about things being slow? You have to look inside yourself for that and be like, you know what? I need to come to peace with just being. Because if you think about it like this, if all of us are trying to achieve what we believe is success. What success looks like for each person is different. But I feel like we're all just looking for success, whatever that looks like for us. And if you think about it, if you think about what your successful version is doing, right? The version of you that's got all of the financial security and abundance that you want, the version of you that's got the love and the family and all of the things that, typical things that people are looking for in life, that version of you is not seeking. That version of you is just like, yeah, I got it. You know what I mean? So in order for you to embody this, I got it flow, or this version of yourself that's already has the things that you're currently seeking for, you have to learn how to generate that mentality and that emotion now. which is why I harp on being present so much, is because being present is the equivalent of just saying I have it, right? Even when you don't see anything, just understanding I have it, because that's what that version of you is doing, right? And I know I'm talking about versions and stuff now, like this is going into like
Sure.
multiversal concepts, or
Yeah.
manifesting the things that you desire. I look at it as something that I'm already doing it. I'm just learning to put myself in the same state that that version of me has already achieved. So for when I get stressed, I just slow down. I'm like, all right, I need to relax and I need to breathe. I need to focus on my breath. That's how I become present. Some people like to focus on a rock or a particular shape, or maybe they just want to meditate. But for me, I just breathe and I focus on my breath. That's how I make myself as present as possible. Because then it gives my mind something to do where it's, the chatter is like it'll be there, but then I'm like, let me just focus on my breath. Like I have somewhere where my awareness and my focus is going, instead of it just being like letting my mind run. And it takes practice. It's gonna happen, but it works for me.
You touched upon that being and that
Hmm.
state of vibration. That's not exactly what you said, but I think you're referring to being in that state of vibration. And maybe, and this is where it might get a bad context to it. A lot of people say, "Oh, manifest. Well, are you faking it? Faking it so you make it." So what's your take on that? Because um, I'm new to manifestation as well. I have
Hmm.
not really manifested anything, I would say. Maybe unconsciously I have. I think definitely unconsciously I have. If it was a bad thing or a good thing, I'm sure we all do. How would you distinguish for someone who is trying to manifest things? How would you break it down or make them understand what actually being is in that context? Does it mean to be passive? Does it mean to be no, you are having a goal, you're having a vision board, and you're repeatedly, constantly meditating on that vision, and you're gonna be hung up on it till it actually happens? Or is it more like, wait a second, ease yourself, be in the present, relax your mind, and then slowly meditate on it and take steps to manifest it? How would that approach be? Maybe completely different from the two things I've mentioned.
Hmm. I would say that the way that I would describe manifestation is that it's consciously bringing something that you desire into the physical, where you can like tangibly interact with it, or it's real, right? Well, quote unquote real for you. um, when you overly focus on something that you want, right, contrary to some of the manifestation practices that are out there that tell you need to like overly think on it, you take yourself out of I have the thing, right? In terms of like a vibrational standpoint, you're taking yourself out of I have this to I don't have it. Even though you're focused on it, that constant focus on it is actually counterproductive, because you're constantly focused on something, and that the version of you that has it, right? If you did have it, we have to think about if you already had the thing, wouldn't be constantly focused on it. So like ideas, emotions, um, the things, the desires that people want, these exist energetically. All things exist energetically first before they become physical. Now the key is understanding how do I put myself in a state where I have the thing, versus it being like this thing that I desire. And when people overly focus on a thing, you're overly focused on your lack of the thing, because you wouldn't be overly focused on it if you had the thing, right? If you already had the money, the car, and the family, and the love, and all that stuff, you wouldn't be like, well, where is it? When is it coming? You know what I mean? So it's
Right.
it's counterproductive from the standpoint of are you behaving like you already have it? Now, what you said about the whole like faking it till you make it, that's one way to look at it. But how I understand it is just this is just the nature. I look at it like I'm a radio tower. And if I'm a radio tower and the station I want to play is abundance, then I'm not going to play the station that's going, I want money, I want money, I want money, I want abundance, I want this and I want that. I would play the station of feeling comfortable with exactly what I have. I already have everything that I need. Am I in a home? Can I breathe? Can I, you know what I mean? Like I start focusing on the things that tell me I have a lot, right? Because you don't realize how much you actually have until it's gone, right? If you
Yes.
lose a leg, you are much more appreciative of the leg that you lost when it's gone. You
Oh,
know
for
what I'm
sure.
saying? Is people have to count their blessings that they have around them before the universe starts bringing in more things. If you're overly focused on lack, I don't have this thing, but I want this thing, and it's taking too long, and all this stuff. You're not in a vibration of being thankful for the stuff that you have. If you achieved everything you wanted, I'm sure you feel very grateful, right? If you approach it from a manifestation standpoint, you did the work and you manifested everything that you're actually looking for, right? And it came into being, you'd be like, damn, universe, thank you. Thank you so much for all of these different things that are popping up in my life and all these blessings and discounts and money and all this other stuff that's popping up. You would be focused on those things. You wouldn't be focused on, well, when's this check coming? And you know what I mean? That keeps you in the same state. You wondering where it's at is keeping you in the same state of wondering where it's at. That's its own frequency. That's not the frequency of abundance. So I always tell people like when you're practicing being present means feeling okay right now, even when things don't look okay. Is understanding that you're okay. And it sounds strange, but when you get the hang of feeling okay right now and feeling okay with the stuff that is around you and being thankful for the things that's around you, then you're emitting thankfulness. You're emitting, I already have it. You're emitting abundance because you're already in an abundant mindset. I already have everything I need. Everything feels good. Opportunities are here. I don't know exactly how things are working out, but it always works out. You know what I mean? Like when you're in that mindset and, it's fake until it starts working. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's not real, right? If quote unquote real, tangible until it starts working. So, you know, it's like it's paradoxical because it's like you have all the control, but it doesn't feel like you have all the control because you've been trained to believe that you are subject to the external environment that you're living in. And um that's not by accident, right? This is, I look at Earth as like a master school, a master class. You are going to be put in situations that really reinforce that you are not in control. You are subject to the forces that be and all these things that are happening around you, and you can't do nothing about it except pray and hope things work out. You know what I mean?
Right, right.
And not that there's anything wrong with that, but it's just that people have a lot more control than they realize.
So you do acknowledge the physical, the energetic, the environment, and the karmic limitations that the soul carries. But at the same time, you're saying that those limitations should not stop you from consciously choosing the state of vibration that you can be in, right?
Yeah, it gets to a point, and I'm speaking from my perspective. From my perspective, it gets to a point where you notice enough things where you're just like, you know what, like you start to catch yourself. Like when you start getting into like, ah, damn, this keeps happening, or keeps happening to me, and you kind of go into that victim mindset. It gets to a point where you start identifying it and you're like, damn, you know what I mean? Like I can see how this has been created in the past for me because I would go into this state. And you start to
Yes.
slowly reel yourself out of that state, you know what I mean? Enough times where it just, your new state of being becomes this place of, okay, I don't prefer this particular thing popping up, but that doesn't mean it's going to shake how I feel, right? Because I don't know how it's going to turn out. I just need to stay in a state of peace and just being like, all right, well, let's see how things play out, because the universe is always working in your favor. That's how I think about stuff. The universe is always working in your favor. Trying to understand all of the moving parts and all that stuff, I have long since I've given that up. Me trying to understand that is not comprehensible at my level right now. And then me understanding timing, I've given that up because I've done enough you know, practices and meditations and trance experiences to understand that time is a very strange thing. It's real when you focus more on it. You know what I mean? But the less you're focused on it, like when you're doing something you really enjoy, it doesn't seem like any time has passed at all.
Right.
You know?
Just like this podcast. Um, yeah. Um, and to further add on to that, when you look at the Buddhist traditions or the Hindu traditions, they talk about the law of karma, right? I mean, it's not like a law. It's just there. Even if you say that it's a law, if you say that it's an effect, you say that it's a phenomenon, it's something that as you exist, it's already there.
hmm
And the good or the bad is what we put a label to, but actually karma is, and it just happens. In a sense, if I am having a thought about you, which is judgmental, that in itself is a karmic reaction that I am unconsciously generating. Now, that could be mental, so there could be something that is physical. Some things in our friendships or relationships. So, the way you treat your neighbor. So, all these things hit you in different angles that you don't even know it's affecting you. And of course, in that same way, when things happen to you, people might be thinking, why me? Why
hmm
me? Why are things so bad for me? Why am I not able to go ahead? Now, if you're asking that question with the intention of, I want to figure it out and go ahead in my journey, great. But maybe most times people are thinking more in terms of, as you mentioned, the victim side of things, where it's like, why me? Boo hoo, right? And then when something bad happens to someone that they don't like, they usually say, karma.
hmm
Yeah, karma got you. Karma is a bitch, right? But oftentimes they don't know it's actually affecting them too. They just are not conscious about it.
Well, you can
Um,
you can observe something and be like, "Wow, I see the energetic result of how this person is behaving or acting or things that they've done," and not be judgmental towards it, right? If you're getting pleasure out of watching somebody suffer, and you have to question, like, where's your energy at if you're getting so much pleasure out of that? You know what I mean?
right,
But yeah,
right.
continue. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh no, no, that's all right. My point there was just to bring that up. Um, but since we are talking about manifestation now, trying to see is there a question that could be beneficial for the audience. So this feeling of rot, and I believe is something that I am currently going through, even though I do recognize that it's part of the greater good and things won't happen just like that. There is a lot of grace and humility that needs to be cultivated when one is going through a rot process. But when it comes to manifestation, um, and if someone feels like they're in a rut and they're seeing all these manifestation videos on YouTube or YouTube Shorts or TikTok or all of these things, and mentally they're convinced that, yes, I need to manifest.
hmm
And I've been trying to be in the present. I have my vision board. I
hmm
am doing the techniques. but why am I still in this rut for so many months in my life? Any thoughts on that?
Um, it's programming. That's how I look at it. Is like when you find yourself in a place like that for that long, it's because the circumstances and situations you've been through have been challenging enough to keep you in a particular vibration, keep you in a particular energy. Now, I don't want to say keep you in a prison sense, right? You're not in a prison when that happens, but doing anything else can feel pointless. It could feel like why, like you just like in that mode where just like, I'm doing this like out of hope, like I hope this thing works out. You know what I mean?
Right.
Um, it can put you in a state where you don't feel like you have any control, right? But this is the great lesson I feel like here is that almost all of us that I can, most people I can think of feel like life is happening to them and they don't have any control over that, right? It takes a lot of conviction and practice to, regardless of what's going on around you, to bring yourself into a state of presence and peace. It almost sounds insane, right? But practicing this, regardless of what's going on, I'm not saying things are just going to magically disappear overnight, but practicing this, you begin to see the results. So people who are in a rut are just people that are still coming to this like realization that they have control, right? It's not something that's like, all right, well, I hear what you say. It all makes sense now. It's not that, because the greatest teachers here are our experiences. So it's the experiences that shape, the quote unquote blockages, or, things that feel like make you feel misaligned, or the challenges or the way of thinking, the programming, the stuff that you feel like needs to change about yourself, whatever. It's the experiences that place those things there, and it's through the experiences that you get yourself out of that space. Because like I said, there's a point where a switch goes off a little bit and it clicks, and you're like, oh, and then it almost becomes nonsensical to go back into that state, right? Or when you go into that state, you catch it, you're like, ooh, like don't do that, because you realize it doesn't hold any value except to create more disruption or chaos or more situations that you don't actually prefer. So it's much like, when you're a child and you're learning how to do this or learning how to do that, and you don't quite know why everybody's doing it, but eventually you start to get to understand, like, oh, like I do need to brush my teeth. You know what I mean? Like, this is there's a value here of brushing my teeth. I need to keep my health.
Right.
Like, it all starts to make sense. And it's the same with, you know understanding your state of being. Your state of being is the generator of your experience. Whether people agree with that or not, I know what's happening for me, and I know how it's working for other people. But when you realize that your state of being is the thing, and being present, right, amongst the chaos is the simplest, most powerful thing that you can do for any situation that you're faced with, it starts to make sense. You may find, I had a situation the other day where I was not particularly feeling creative. I didn't really feel good. I felt like things were a little chaotic. I just started to breathe. I didn't go, all right, I need to come up with a plan and we're gonna address this person. I didn't do any of that stuff. I just was like, I just need to breathe. So I took a moment and just breathe. And all of the stuff that I was worried about dissolved. Now, is somebody else gonna have the same result when they do it? I couldn't tell you, right? Because I've been, I'm enough along the journey that I do believe that my manifestations come in quicker than they were before, right? So if, and this is an assumption, I would assume that that's the case for other people, right? When you have more things that you're kind of like anchored onto about, how this thing isn't working,
Yeah.
then it may be a little bit more time for it to work itself out. But there comes a point where it's like, okay, you do it enough times, you start to understand it. Like, oh, when I get myself peaceful, things just work out. Like, I don't know how they're going to work, but they just work out, right? But when you get hung up on how it's going to work out, then you're not being present, or you're limiting the possibilities that the universe can resolve a thing when you're overly hung up on, well, the only way this thing is going to disappear is if such and such and this and that happens, because then now your mind is fully focused on, this is the result I need these things to line up in order for this to happen. But it may happen in the most mystical, magical, out of left field way, and you might be like, oh, okay, well, I didn't see that coming, but I'm glad I'm glad that this resolved itself. So um I understand being in that space of uh, kind of feeling like it's pointless or it's not actually doing anything, but that's the challenge. It's you kind of have to, like, you just have to do it and just be like, all right, I'm just gonna trust this random guy I saw, and and just breathe through the situation and just stay as calm as I can be, and or do something fun, do something that is eliciting joy. Yeah, like, it's that state of being that's important. So if you can choose to watch some comedy or do something that makes you happy, then do that. If you want to take a walk or whatever, if you have time to do that. Whatever brings you peace, whatever changes that internal frustration or challenge or whatever, into it, converts it to something else, because that feeling is what's emitting and reflecting in your environment. So if you're full of hate and rage and all that stuff, you will find your environment a lot more chaotic than most people. You may find yourself in more situations where it's reinforcing aggression or hate or whatever, right? So understanding the state of being is the core of inner alchemy.
Mm. In the previous podcast that I did with Mr. Adam Kennedy, he talked about the Übermensch, which is a philosophy from Friedrich Nietzsche. And during the podcast, Adam Kennedy talked about the phrase or the term amor fati, which means love of fate. So there comes a point towards life they're like, okay, I can't keep banging my head on this because it's what fate is. But that doesn't mean you're giving up on life. You're just accepting for what the reality is, rather than trying to live in the fantasy land and not being in the present moment and taking accountability, right?
Yeah,
um so it just made me think of that, where people might misunderstand manifestation as this, I've thought about it, I'm going to manifest it tomorrow. Oh, it's not happening. Why? And then, not knowingly, unknowingly, they enter the state of anxiety, restlessness, fear. So it kind of brings the point back to the basic fundamentals of just meditation, breath work, journaling, all of this.
it's the simple
And
stuff. If you think about what all those things do, they have a tendency of quieting the mind, bringing you in a state where you feel calm, you feel, I mean, I know that I've had breathwork sessions where I feel great afterward, very floaty, very, just, oh man, like I just feel, you know what I mean? Like you just feel recharged, but peaceful, a peaceful recharge, not like anxiety recharge. You know what I mean? If you look at all these different techniques, right, a lot of them are just trying to bring you into a calm state, a state where you feel good. So it's powerful to do meditation when you feel like things are in chaos. It's powerful to do breath work when you feel like things are in chaos because, even though meditation in particular might be pretty difficult because your mind may start running on the things that are, quote unquote wrong, but you're making a conscious attempt to calm yourself down and just be present and be with yourself, and through that peace that you are, having brief moments of, you can elicit change. Mhm.
It's yeah, it brings this podcast to this full circle moment where we started off with energy work and then we slipped into manifestation, and
Mhm.
how towards the end we're like both are needed, one can't be without another, but also like significance of taming the mind and cleansing your energy where you're like in the present and you're accepting reality, and at the same time with that intention trying to elicit that vibration within and around you in order to not only come to terms with reality, but at the same time, with that mind and awareness, you're able to create possibilities that could be favorable to where you're supposed to go from point A to point B and not from point A to point Z.
Mhm. Yeah, it's a level of surrendering to the universe. Like, y- your beingness, your existence is enough. If you learn to have faith that you're here for a reason and the universe will guide you to exactly where you're supposed to be doing the thing that you're supposed to do, and it'll align with what you're passionate about. So it's not even really like you're doing anything because it won't feel like work. It's going to align with what you love to do. That's the nature, is that your passion aligns up with what you're here to do. You really enjoy doing this thing. It's somehow, some way, that thing is going to lead you down a path that you can't see right now, but it's going to be exactly where you're supposed to be at. And you're going to enjoy every second of the ride.
Beautiful, man.
I appreciate it.
Well,
Thank you.
of course, of course. I thank you for doing this, and I'm sure a lot will benefit from today's episode. Of course, this is not the end of the many more talks that we'll be having. But yeah, man, it was beautiful doing this with you. Any final conclusions or thoughts for anyone who is watching?
Um, I just understand that you're in control, even when it doesn't feel that way. Um, and your state of being matters. If you feel anxiety and chaos and you're not feeling good, then your number one priority, in my personal opinion, should be, how do I feel good right now? What can I do in to change my state of beingness to feel at peace, right? Um, Not hide from it, right, or avoidance, because that's a fine line, but breathing, meditation, simple things that, bring you some level of like, all right, let me just calm down, right? And that opens many doors. And if people want to know more about that, then they can check out my channel, which is Drew the Energy. I'm sure it'll be linked on here somewhere. And I
Oh
appreciate
yeah,
you on that.
for sure, man. This will be on both my channel and yours. But people, much love to you. Be present and good luck. See you.
Thank you.